Morning, YouTube. Well, today I'm at the Drake Well Museum. In 1859, Edwin Drake was the first to drill for oil. It's right along Oil Creek here in Pennsylvania. And behind here is a replica of his original oil drilling rig. And from here, he only had to go down 69.5 feet. Well, here in the engine house part of it there's a steam boiler, and the steam would have come through the pipe, run this piston, which did this big flywheel, and of course the flywheel would have been running this arm, which going back and forth, ran the drill bit down in, and they could adjust how far just by doing this and loosening this up, so they could extend it down a little bit and make it go down farther, add more rods to it, and keep on drilling. So that was a reproduction of the original one. That wasn't the actual equipment he used, but similar. And around the grounds here, they have examples of other type of rigs. This one could have been dragged in, and there's I'll show you some others. So there's different kinds of rigs that they used over the years for drilling for oil, and of course this one would have been a little bit more mobile, a little more modern. It's got rubber tires on it, got huge flywheels, pulleys for belts. I think we saw some of these similar to this out when I was traveling 20 way out in the oil fields out west. So this one's in a little bit better shape. Of course, with the ever-present danger of fire, it wasn't very long before steel derricks replaced the old wooden ones, and they moved the fire farther away from the rigs. So for this one, steam boiler would have been right out here and piped in. Would have kept it away from the actual operations. So let's go take a look up inside here. So this would have been a wooden arm for the drill rig, and of course that would have been eventually replaced with a big steel one. And so this is the operating the arm part that we saw on the other side. But all that is run off of this. This steam, like I said, out there in that steam boiler would have run this big piston rig that basically ran a giant big pulley system. This little pulley going really fast up to this big flywheel. That flywheel was running the crank here that did the arm, and big chains. Of course, no safety equipment to keep you away from this, but there's only about 4 guys on the rig at any one time, so, and they all experienced. So you get down in here, this is all the various wheels and pulleys and cables, and the drill down into this drill bed here, or this drill. So a little bit of terminology. That big beam that rocked back and forth is called the walking beam, and temper screw would have been up here to adjust that bit. And there's a cable that comes down from that down through the derrick floor to a string of tools and the actual drill bit down at the bottom. And of course, one of the good features of the steel derrick was that at some point, either the well came in or didn't, but they could tear them down, move them to a new location, and put them back up. They would last a lot longer than the wooden ones. Wooden ones, originally they made them so that they were interchangeable parts. They could move them, but of course wood takes a little bit more damage when you tear things apart and put them back together than the steel. So the steel derricks actually were used for quite a long time, but eventually they had drill rigs that were mounted on trucks and could drive out there and didn't need that whole derrick. So don't see many of those anymore. And of course, when they first started, they were getting more oil than they could handle, so they started building, bigger wooden barrels at each well, like this one, and eventually even bigger. They would put all of that all the oil into wooden barrels, wooden kegs, and to be shipped. Of course, there's only so many you could put on a rail car. And couldn't stack them too high, and so a couple of guys came up with the idea of putting something like that, put two of them on a rail car, and successfully transported the oil that way. Of course, open tops, they would tend to slosh a little bit. There's always that with the steam engines, sparks, always a problem, possible fires. So it wasn't very long before they made the oil tanker cars and would transport the oil that way. That lasted, the teamsters moving the barrels, and they started building pipelines and got the pipelines down, and eventually the pipelines extended out even more so that not as much was being moved by rail, although some of it still is. Well, that concludes my my visit here to the Drake Well Museum on the banks of the Oil Creek here in western Pennsylvania. It's near Titusville, and it's north of Pittsburgh quite a ways, but interesting place. And I knew a little bit of the history, but to actually visit the site is one of my things. So I'm going to get back on the road after some lunch and head west and south. We'll see what I can find along the way. See you later, YouTube.